Did you know that Fallout New Vegas only has one character in the entire game named Raider? Despite this, New Vegas and the Mojave finds itself home to many Raider groups, often using their brutal and sadistic methods, with help from the region's chaotic nature of course. These groups have established dominance in the lawless desert frontier. So if there is no other Raider character found in the game, who exactly are these bandits and marauders? Well, let's talk about it. These are the gangs of New Vegas. The Fiends. The Fiends, a menacing gang of chem-addled raiders, are a notorious force in the Mojave Wasteland. While just how they came to be remains unknown, the Fiends' reliance on chems has turned them into a dangerous and unpredictable faction. A sizable group of Fiends can be found residing in Vault 3 along the Vegas outskirts. Designed as a control vault, Vault 3 would have no assigned experiment. Instead, the vault was to operate as originally intended. It was meant to be a fallout shelter. And this worked for a while. However, thanks to a water leak, the residents of Vault 3 were forced to leave their sanctuary in search of a solution. Their naivety regarding wasteland life is what eventually did them in. The Fiend leader, Motor Runner, would lead his group in a raid of the vault that would result in the deaths of the entire vault population. Following the raid, Motor Runner and his people would set up shop in Vault 3. Using it as their primary base of operations. With a safe and secured home, the Fiends would only grow stronger, eventually going from a thorn in the side of the New California Republic to a credible threat. The Courier can effectively put an end to the Fiends for good if they take up Major Daughtry's bounty and eliminate Motor Runner. With Fiend leadership eradicated, the rest of these chem-addled raiders find themselves scattered throughout the wasteland. Without the guidance and organization of Motor Runner, Cook, Violet, and Driver Nephi, the rest of the Fiends succumb to the horrors of the wastes. The Great Khans. Once a nomadic tribe, the Khans, New Khans, and now finally Great Khans may have finally found a home in the lawless Mojave Wasteland. Under the leadership of Papa Khan, the fortune of the twice-decimated tribe was on the upswing when they moved to Nevada in 2267, 14 years prior to the start of New Vegas. A contingent of followers of the apocalypse would reach out to the newly arrived faction and offer them a basic education. The followers taught the Great Khans chemistry, reading, and writing, hoping that the group would begin to manufacture their own medicine to sustain themselves. However, instead, the Great Khans would become the greatest drug runners the Mojave had ever seen. The Great Khans would manufacture their own chems in order to trade with groups like the Fiends or Westside for necessary supplies. Unlike past iterations of the Khans, being free from NCR-influenced lands meant that they had little to worry about. Outside of House, his Securitrons, and the Three Families, the Khans were clearly the strongest Mojave faction at the time. However, this would change with the NCR's arrival to the region in 2274, and 4 years later, after the NCR's victory during the First Battle of the Hoover Dam, the NCR stood uncontested in the Mojave. After defeating the Legion at the dam and the Brotherhood of Steel at Helios 1, the NCR set their eyes on their next target, the Great Khans. In what became known as the Bitter Springs Massacre, the NCR launched an assault on the home of the Great Khans. Many innocent children, women, and elderly were needlessly killed in the attack. Immediately regretting the incident and how it played out, the NCR permitted the surviving Great Khans to relocate at Red Rock Canyon. It would be here that the Great Khans would become reliant on the manufacturing of chems. The canyon provided no farmland and no fresh water. The Khans needed to peddle chems to survive. In a bid to restore his tribe back to its once great legacy, Papa Khan would strike a deal with the Legion. In exchange for land, wealth, and revenge, the Khans would join the Legion's army. Unbeknownst to Khan leadership, however, the Legion had no plans to make good on their promise, instead viewing the Khans as yet another tribe to assimilate and conquer. The fate of the Great Khans is dependent on the actions of the courier. The player can influence Papa Khan to break his alliance with Caesar, replace Papa leadership with one of his advisors, or persuade Papa about the legacy of the Great Khans. Each ending determines whether or not the Great Khans survive the aftermath of the Second Battle of the Hoover Dam, with many outcomes leading to the Raider faction's decimation. What were once a powerful nomadic raider gang become casualties in the NCR Legion War. The Powder Gangers. Once inmates at the NCR Correctional Facility, the group soon to be known as the Powder Gangers staged a riot. As Legion presence in the region demanded more and more attention, NCR manpower migrated eastwards towards the Colorado River. This provided the inmates with an opportunity to escape. Using these stockpiled explosives originally intended to pave the way for new railways, the inmates swiftly overwhelmed what remained of the NCR forces. It would be thanks to these explosives that the Powder Gangers would get their name. Now free from their prison sentences, the group split. Some followed Samuel Cook to Vault 19, some stayed at the prison with Eddie, and others forged their own paths as escaped convicts. While loosely scattered and having no overarching leadership, the group's use of explosives, prison jumpsuit attire, and outlaw nature unite them all as Powder Gangers. Many Powder Gangers attempt to survive the wasteland as bandits, continuing their reckless ways by attacking caravans, traders, and local townships. Some do this while roaming, pushing their presence as far as Nipton. Others, like Eddie's group, commit banditry from the comfort of their former prison, attacking any caravan that dares cross the I-15. However, due to the group's nature and lack of strong leadership, Powder Ganger leaders typically find themselves under threat from insubordination. For example, by the start of New Vegas, a small contingent of Eddie's Powder Gangers, led by a man named Chavez, find themselves wanting to form their own Powder Ganger splinter, free from Eddie's rule and taxation. It's up to the courier to put an end to this. Now, while some Powder Gangers commit common banditry, others have greater ambitions. Samuel Cook, the leader of the revolt at the NCRCF, took a portion of Powder Gangers to Vault 19, where he plans to use the abandoned shelter as a headquarters for his anticipated war against the NCR. However, even the great Sam Cook has a leadership problem. Realizing that their Powder Ganger division is quite small and the vault is incapable of sustaining them, some in the group, notably a man named Philip Lem, feel it would be best for the group to surrender to the NCR. It is with the courier's aid that this dispute can be put to an end. As a result, either Lem gets his wish and the Powder Gangers plan to surrender, or Samuel Cook takes his group to Red Rock Canyon to join up with the Great Khans, following the old saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. While numerous, the Powder Gangers are the least organized of all previously mentioned raider gangs. While both the Fiends and Great Khans have a clear number one, the Powder Gangers find themselves quite fractured. It's up to the courier to decide if the Powder Gangers become a formidable force in the wasteland, or if they end up facing the consequences of their criminal past. The Vipers. While we've finished with the three main raider factions of the Mojave, there exists plenty more smaller factions who find themselves facing off against law and order. The Vipers are one such group. Vault 15 was a Californian vault designed to shelter people from radically diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds. Due to overpopulation and a rift thanks to the group's differences, the vault separated into 4 groups before leaving. One group would go on to form Shady Sands, the eventual capital of the NCR, and the others would form 3 raider groups, the Khans, the Jackals, and the Vipers. The Vipers' glory days came well before their migration to the Mojave Wasteland. Following their exodus from Vault 15 in 2097, the Vipers, a group of 200 or so, found themselves camped out at a small oasis surrounding a large crater-like pit. Their leader at the time, a man named Jonathan Faust, fell into said crater-like pit and was never seen again. For 1 week, the Vipers stayed at the oasis, leaderless and lost. Some left the group, while others fell ill. Eventually, just as the group was getting ready to move on from their oasis, Jonathan returned. The man, now crazed, spoke of a viper god who showed him the true way. After seeing the skeptical faces of his peers, Jonathan unleashed a pair of mutated vipers onto his group. Once the chaos of the ordeal had died down, only Jonathan and 40 or so people remained, now crazed by the viper venom. This event would indicate the start of the Viper Gang and be known as the Great Awakening. 28 years later, the Vipers found themselves on the losing side of a settlement raid. The Vipers sought to attack the hub, at the time a relatively young trading town. The attack was repelled by the hub defenders, marking a significant defeat for the Vipers. Reeling from their loss, the Vipers started to rebuild, bolstering their numbers using slaves. Following a series of successful attacks and raids, the Vipers attracted the attention of the Brotherhood of Steel. Viewing the Vipers as good target practice, High Elder Maxon II led an operation against the Vipers. The Vipers were getting absolutely stomped until Maxon removed his helmet and was nicked by a poison arrow, eventually leading to his death. In retaliation for killing their leader, Head Paladin Rhombus led a merciless crusade against the Vipers. Following their decimation, many Vipers fled California entirely, winding up in the Mojave. It's here that the remaining Vipers resort to opportunistic attacks against caravans. Still reeling from their catastrophic defeat at the hands of the Brotherhood, the Vipers would never become more than petty raiders. The Jackals. The Jackals are another raider group that originated from California's Vault 15. Known for being quite insane, Jackals are solely concerned with survival. As such, it's rumored that they devour the flesh of their victims, making them feared cannibals. While once upon a time they were known to raid settlements and towns, like Shady Sands for example, later confrontations with the Khans left them a shell of their former selves. It would be around 2155, 6 years before the events of the first Fallout, that the Jackals would flee California. By 2281, the start of New Vegas, small isolated groups of Jackals can be found in and around the Mojave. Their run-ins with factions who possess greater firepower than them has resulted in the group becoming petty, but still crazed highwaymen, ready to attack any passerby. Still capable adventurers, like the Courier for example, would make quick work of such a disorganized group. The Scorpions. Continuing the trend of desert critters, the next gang of raiders is none other than the Scorpions. Unlike crazed raiders, the gang is composed of small-time thieves and chem dealers, primarily making ends meet by selling chems and extorting the residents of West Side. As the gang's headquarters, the Monte Carlo Suites is located in Outer Vegas, they tend to scrap with, and often lose to, the Fiends. The only real role the Scorpions play in the New Vegas story is as scapegoats. During the Whitewash side quest, an NCR quest where the Courier is tasked with discovering the fate of a missing corporal, it's revealed that a West Side farmer, Tom Anderson, had a confrontation with the corporal, leading to their death. Instead of turning Anderson in, the Courier can blame the death on the local Scorpions gang. Other than that, the gang simply exists to be eliminated by an ambitious Courier. Like their namesake, the Scorpion gang are merely just a bunch of pests. The Greasers. And finally, the Greasers are the most novice of all the raider gangs thus mentioned. Having recently taken up residence in the North Vegas sewers, the Greasers have become a thorn in the side of many Outer Vegas residents. A 4-person troupe led by the greasiest of them all, Greasy Johnny, the Greasers live a simple life as sewer rats, shaking down and extorting Vegas residents for caps. While nowhere close to being deadly raiders that one might expect, their presence is enough for Crandon, a local militiaman, to commission the courier's help. Wanted dead or alive, the ultimate fate of Greasy Johnny's greaser group is left to the courier. And that wraps up our exploration into the many gangs of Fallout New Vegas. From petty thieves to once great dynasties, these gangs have made the most of the lawless Mojave frontier. Oftentimes, their stories and fates intertwined with the actions of the courier. While Fallout New Vegas only has one lone NPC known as Raider, the Mojave Wasteland isn't short of crazed marauders and bandits. That's all from me today, folks. If you like the video, be sure to share and subscribe. Have a good rest of your day and a happy holidays. Cheers.
This is a poem I wrote about the dark loneliness that suffuses my soul. Rain clouds wrap my heart in sorrow black as silk. My empty scream does not echo, even though we're in a canyon. My soul aches, but not as much as my limbs, because I've been beaten severely. That's it. What do you think?